Hello and welcome to our next podcast in the Archetypes series. In this one, we wanted to look at the idea of archetypes in colors. So again, just a short review. Remember that archetypes are important universal symbols that seem to transcend time in literature. So we have old pieces and new pieces all pulling on the same universal patterns. They cross cultures. So these could be pieces written in Asia, Africa, Europe, the United States, and they all tend to rely on these same universal patterns. And they also cross genre. So whether it's historical fiction, fantasy fiction, science fiction, any of those things, they're going to rely on these universal symbols and patterns. And so in this case, we wanted to look at the idea of colors. And so the first color we wanted to look at is that of black. Since it is absolute, it is just black. There are no really shades of this. And so black tends to stand for the idea of chaos or the unknown, definitely sadness and evil. And so think about this as you're reading. Look at what and how your more evil characters are described, your antagonists, the quote-unquote bad guys to the hero. They tend to be maybe dressed in black or referred to with very negative, dark wordings. So very likely, you would have a character like Voldemort or Darth Vader or the Terminator, not only wearing black, like you can see the images here, but also all of the words used to describe them are going to be empty, a void, sullen, gloomy. All of these words have overtones of black in them. That carries that universal pattern that black tends to be seen as bad. In contrast to that, we may have the color of white, which is often seen as a symbol of purity, light, innocence. And think about how we use those just culturally. In Western culture, we tend to use white for wedding dresses because the idea is that a woman is supposed to be pure and innocent before she is married, therefore she should be dressed in white. We baptize babies in white, oftentimes. Certain religions have their kids wearing white when they receive their first communion. The idea is that these are milestones for humanity, and previous to those milestones, the people receiving those should be innocent of whatever they're about to receive. They should be naive to that. They should be a pure in spirit type thing, and so the most logical color is that of white. We can also see this reflected in popular culture. So we get images of Gandalf there in the bottom left from the Lord of the Rings series. He tends to be seen in grays or whites because he is the good, enlightened force that is helping the Hobbit through his journeys. And when we have such absolutes as black and white, they tend to overlap universally with other literary terms. Items like irony or juxtaposition, where we're showing contrasts opposite each other, or perhaps the idea of foil characters, where we have the protagonist and their foil, the antagonist, clashing throughout a piece. And so what better way to reinforce that these two characters are in conflict than to dress them in opposite colors, or to at least describe them in opposite colors. So the very famous Spy versus Spy series in the upper left, Gandalf and Saruman in The Lord of the Rings, Yoda and Count Dooku in the new versions of the Star Wars series, Skywalker and Vader in the older series. And then the very interesting, if you're following ballet, the idea of Swan Lake, where we usually have the lead being one actress, one ballet dancer, playing two different roles. She plays the more pure, innocent, virginal white swan, and then she will change costumes at various times and play the more deceptive, devious, evil black swan throughout the entire ballet. Here we have one person playing two different diametrically opposed roles, and those are reinforced oftentimes in her costuming, the clash of black and white. We may also have the archetypal color of red that oftentimes symbolizes the idea of great passion and emotion. It could literally be fire, as in like the burning bush kind of thing, so think of Christian imagery there. It could also mean the idea of sacrifice, of spilling of one's blood for somebody else. And so you can see some of the great characters in literature. Perhaps the one that many American students will have connections to is to the bottom left picture, and that is supposed to be a still from the more modern interpretation of Mice and Men. And this is supposed to be Curly's wife. That's her name. It's not Sally, and they just call her Curly's wife. No, her only name is Curly's wife. And throughout that book, she is always described as perhaps a little forward, perhaps a little emotional, perhaps a little overly flirtatious. She definitely has the eye, as they say throughout that book. So she seems to be very passionate, very out there, and so she's described in the words of the text as having a lot of red, rouged lips, red lipstick and nail polish, and red shoes. And again, that reinforces who she is. Very passionate, she gets red. We may also have the archetypal color of blue. And so blue probably relates to the sky, to the water, but it also relates to the concepts of being positive, secure, tranquil. And so in Greek mythology, we may have Hera, the picture in the middle there, and we also have the character of Dumbledore from the Harry Potter series. And he was, throughout the entire 7-book series, he was relatively positive that they could figure this stuff out. He always did serve to be the most tranquil, the most calming factor in Harry's life. When everything was going crazy and they needed to, use the time turner in book 3, they needed to free somebody, they needed to do whatever and solve some crazy situation, Dumbledore was always there, pretty calm, encouraging him to move forward. So he ended up being a very calming force, which blue really reinforces. The color of green offers some interesting archetypes throughout the literature that we may be looking at. Its first idea is that of growth. So green things grow. Plants grow when they're green in the springtime. That often leads to the idea of hope. And of course, with humanity, we get fertility. You can see a pretty famous picture in the upper right there. The woman who is pregnant is conveniently dressed in green also. The green field in the spring at the bottom. And in the upper left, we have green again, this time in the musical of Wicked, but that comes from the idea of the Wizard of Oz, where they go to see the Emerald City, where everything is supposed to be good and positive and great. So growth and hope in the Emerald City, which is green, that makes some good sense. But with everything that is growing, we also have the potential for its opposite to be shown. And so with growth comes the idea of decay, because every living thing has to die at some point. So while you may see somebody dressed in green in your novels, that could also be an indicator that they are going to die within the course of that novel, because there is a cycle of life. Not to get too Disney or anything, but the circle of life can be symbolized with that green as the beginning of that. Another archetypal color to look at is that of yellow, which often stands for the idea of enlightenment or wisdom. It can also be shown as gold and wealth, since gold itself is literally yellow. But you can see some of the historical figures there in the middle. We have the Dalai Lama, who has highlights of yellow. We have many Buddhist monks will also dress in yellow throughout. But we also see examples in the bottom left from Slumdog Millionaire. The girl that our hero is pursuing throughout the whole movie is Latika, and she is always shown in yellow because she seems to be what is fueling him and encouraging him to go on this heroic journey. We also have in the bottom right, again from the Wizard of Oz, the yellow brick road. And again, this really connects with that archetypal idea of enlightenment, that if you follow the yellow brick road, you are going to be enlightened as to what you need, but also how the wizard can help you. And so that choice is not random. They did not make the red brick road. They did not choose blue. They chose yellow. And so that's about it in terms of the archetypal colors we wanted to look at. I'm sure if you wanted to spend many more hours, weeks, months, years, you could find some symbolic meaning for almost every color in the rainbow, such as purple tends to be a connection to royalty, etc. But we wanted to give you kind of a preview of some of the more important colors that you're going to stumble across in your reading of mostly Western literature. But at the same time, what makes archetypes so cool is that they pervade culture. They cross the world. They cross time, and they cross a genre. So as you are reading and building that background knowledge, pay attention to how characters are dressed. Or if they're not dressed in a certain color, how are they described? If there's a reddish hue about them, if there's a yellowish glow, that's important. Is that connecting to the archetypes that we've shown you here? Most likely. So as always, thank you for listening. If you have any questions, go ahead and bring those into class, and we will see you soon. Thanks.